All right, everybody. Thank you so much for checking us out here. It's your main man, Tommy, on the spot. Welcome to the first edition of Disney 101, a Disney podcast brought to you by myself and my guest host each and every week, my main man, Steve. Steve's down in Orlando, Florida, right in the heart of Walt Disney country. A former cast member. He's worked at Walt Disney World. He's your go-to source for all things Disney. I'm just a fan. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest host, Steve. You can see him down there in the little section there. If he spoke, he would pop up here in the main screen. But thank you guys for checking us out here today on Disney 101. We're going to be talking about all of the different news stories going on in the world of Walt Disney World, in the world of the parks. And then later on, we're going to get into our main topic, which is going to be kind of the beginning, the start of your beginner's guide to a trip to Walt Disney World. So thank you guys for checking us out. And Steve, how are you doing out there today?
Good. You know, it did its typical afternoon thunderstorm here, but it's since cleared out, and it's pretty nice out.
Yeah, well, I mean, down here in New York, it's stifling, as you can tell by my appearance of sweating bullets over here in New York. So we've officially installed AC, but we do not have AC in the studio, so to speak. So got some fans going on. We're trying to do the best that we can. So I guess we'll just start off. Why don't you just tell a little bit about your background, what makes you such a fan of Walt Disney World, of Disney in general, and then I'll do the same myself.
Sure. So I actually first visited Walt Disney World as an adult, actually about 8 years ago in 2010. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we came down. Actually, it was both of our times. It was the first time being down here, and then we just fell in love with it. The first time you walk into Magic Kingdom is really, it is magical in every sense of the word. And we just fell in love with it, and so much so that my wife decided to do the Disney College program, which is a great opportunity for college students to both earn college credit and get some real world experience and some Disney World experience. But she loved it. She loved working for the company. And at the time, we were both looking to get a new start on life, as it were. And we decided to make the jump from New York to Orlando. And so I worked for the company for about 5 years doing various things. I worked at Mission Space. It was my start, my home. And then I became a coordinator. I moved over to Tomorrowland, where I did attractions coordinator, which basically is kind of your step up from your kind of frontline cast member. And then I moved over to be a Disney Vacation Club vacation planner. That's where I spent about 1.5 years, 2 years of my Disney career.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, and I remember when you guys were still here in New York. I'm in New York, despite you wearing the Brooklyn T-shirt.
Right, yeah, you have to represent a little bit.
You're repping it. I give you credit for that. But I remember growing up, Disney was something that we did literally every single year. And it was usually the Magic Kingdom because we were kids at the time. And our grandparents lived down in Orlando. So we'd go down to Florida every single year. We'd go to usually the Magic Kingdom. Maybe we'd squeeze like a little bit, maybe one day over in like MGM Studios, which it used to be, obviously now Hollywood Studios. But for us, Magic Kingdom was where it was at. We would go every single year. And then probably by the time I turned 14, and we'll try to guide parents who are going through a similar thing, bringing their 13, 14-year-olds in the weeks to come to Disney World when, the 14-year-olds start to think they're a little too cool for school and, Disney's no longer for them. So every single picture I posed with the characters, it was throwing up my devil horns, and suddenly I was a rocker and I was super cool. And so at that point, we kind of transitioned into going down to different types of theme parks in Orlando, and did not return. So this was probably 2001, I think, was our last trip. And then I did not return for a dozen years until we came to visit you guys in 2013. And my girlfriend, now my wife, we fell in love with it, and we've been to the parks every year since, and we've been to Disneyland, and we've even been to Disneyland Paris. So we've been all over the place. So it's been it's been pretty cool. And now kind of trying to dive into seeing, what's out there, what else is out there in the world of Disney. And what gave me the idea for this podcast is that I feel like every time Steve and I would talk on the phone, I would usually we'd shoot the breeze for a little while, and then we would go and start talking about the world of Disney and start talking about the biggest news stories of the day. Hey, did you hear this movie's coming out soon? Oh, do you hear they're making this spin-off of Star Wars? And we talk about that, or we talk about this attraction closing and that attraction coming up down the pipeline. And then we'd usually talk about one big thing in Disney. Hey, when you guys come down to Disney next time, we got to go check this out. We got to go eat here. And I was like, this would make for a pretty interesting podcast. I know that there's a lot of there's a big world of Disney podcasting out there, and so I figured why not kind of jump on here and try to do our own thing, and hopefully it works out well, and everyone gets to enjoy it, and along the way we'll be able to help folks out who are planning to go to Disney World themselves. Yeah,
absolutely. So what's our first topic of today?
So one of the big things I wanted to discuss, obviously, last week it was announced that James Gunn is no longer going to be the director of Guardians of the Galaxy. He was officially fired by Disney. He's over some old comments he made on Twitter. It's caused quite a bit of a backlash for his dismissals, specifically from Dave Bautista. Always have to have the wrestling tie-in, but Bautista has been a little bit unhappy about this. James Gunn obviously found Bautista, kind of gave Bautista his first big break in Hollywood with the role of Drax, and he's not happy about it. A lot of people are up in arms about this decision to fire James Gunn. Steve, what do you think about it?
I agree with the decision to an extent. I agree with it insofar as the reasons why they gave, but they're also not completely consistent in that sense. You actually had, I believe it was Bobcat Goldthwait, the old 90s comedian, who also tweeted, I think he also tweeted something along the lines of, my voice is going to be used in an upcoming Disneyland attraction, but because of comments that I myself have made in the past, I think that you, meaning, him talking to Disney as a whole, should take my voice out of that attraction. And it's referring to I believe it's going to be a World of Color reimagining. And, he's not the only person that, that has worked for Disney or done work for Disney that has done controversial things. A couple just off the top of my head would be like Gilbert Gottfried. He was a stand-up comedian. He was huge. And he did the voice of Iago in Aladdin. And, he's not a clean comedian. And more recently, Patton Oswalt, he does the voice of Remy in Ratatouille. And some of his stand-up comedy, he actually points out the fact that he is not a clean comic and that he does work for, he does a lot of voiceover work for other things that are kind of family-oriented. And in that sense, you kind of have to be consistent. You're either going to say every single person that works for the Disney company has to have this clean-cut image, or you can accept the fact that these people have other careers and have other lives that you might not necessarily agree with 100% of the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a big change. Obviously, when you're in the middle of a series like that, from just strictly from a fan perspective of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies and enjoying them so much, you kind of wonder where they're going to go from here in terms of the actual movies. I know they're going to definitely do Guardians 3, but you hope that the storytelling is consistent. And I mean, obviously, I know James Gunn was the director, so they might have already had the story going there, but it's definitely going to change things. And I think it's tough in regards to James Gunn, because not excusing anything he said, and he's come right out and owned it and said he shouldn't be excused for anything that he said. But back in that time period when he was saying those things, it was an attempt at humor. It wasn't necessarily, certainly not something that many people would find funny, but the stuff that he was talking about was stuff that at his job at that time, whatever he was doing, I mean, he was a stand-up comic somewhere, or he was writing for something, and he was encouraged to make kind of lewd comedy like that. So he would make comments like this in an attempt to get a reaction, an attempt to get a following, like so many people do. So it'll be interesting to see, what comes of that if he does eventually be brought back. But Disney, at the same time, you got to feel from their perspective when it is comments about childhood pornography, and Disney's a company that appeals mostly to families and kids. Their hands are kind of tied there. Well, what are they supposed to do? So it's definitely tough.
Yeah, and especially with the recent controversy with John Lasseter, and it was a lot of that was another decision that I'm sure wasn't made lightly, but based on everything else that's going on in the world, a lot of times when you're a company that's as big as Disney, things that are going on in society and just in the public generally, it will dictate your policy, and it will dictate a lot of your decisions that are made.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of keeping with the Marvel realm as we move along here, it was announced today that Disney has officially revealed the name for the new Disneyland Hong Kong, and I'm getting this from the Theme Park Insider site. Robert Niles put out a story about this earlier today. Disney reveals name for new Hong Kong Ant-Man and the Wasp ride. Disney finally has revealed the name for its Buzz Lightyear replacement at the Hong Kong Disney World. And we've long known that the shooter ride would be getting an Ant-Man and the Wasp theme as part of the park's creation for a new Marvel Land, but Disney hadn't given a title for the new attraction. That all changes right now. Ant-Man and the Wasp Nano Battle will debut next year in Hong Kong Disneyland, and that's where they're going to be. And it says Disney kicked off the Marvel invasion of Hong Kong Disneyland's Tomorrowland with the Star Tours-like Iron Man experience last year, and has plans for a new Marvel-themed dark ride for 2023. So they actually put out a little video hyping up Ant-Man and the Wasp, Nanoland, and I guess this is just kind of the bringing of Marvel into that Disney universe kind of in all parks. Kind of an interesting choice, though. What do you think of Ant-Man and the Wasp getting their own attraction?
I think it's a great choice. Reading the little attraction description that I did, and looking at the concept art and everything, as I'm doing right now, it looks like it's going to be a dark ride in the vein of Buzz Lightyear. It looks, at least from the technology and from like the way that everyone is holding their blasters and everything, looks like it's going to be more like Disneyland's version of the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger blast, where it's you have your gun or whatever technology it is that Ant-Man gave you, and you're going to be fighting their enemies, which it looks really cool. And
from a perspective of somebody who's been following, some of the attractions, I know obviously the Ratatouille attraction in Disneyland Paris has gotten a big following. I am a big fan of Crush, so I know he has his own spin cycle in Disneyland Paris that I even though it made me very nauseous, I enjoyed quite a bit. I also hope that this means that when they kind of have rides, sometimes they have rides and then those rides make their way. Obviously, Ratatouille is their attraction is going to be opening up in Disney World, I believe, certainly before the anniversary. The Slinky Coaster, though it's way different in Disney World, than the ride in Disneyland Paris, made its way over from there. So I think that is something that is pretty cool. And hopefully at some point we get those types of attractions there. And I know Ant-Man and Wasp may not be have the following as a Spider-Man or I guess some of the Avengers, so to speak, but it's cool to see them be profiled a little bit. Sometimes you depend on Disney to have a profile for movies that may not be as I don't want to say popular, because I know Ant-Man and Wasp have a following, but it'll be interesting to see if those types of attractions continue to come out in the parks over in the U.S. like they're doing with Guardians.
Oh yeah, certainly, and I think there's something to be said for making an attraction not necessarily that capitalizes on popularity necessarily, because Disney has a good track record of doing that as well. But it sounds more like they're trying to fit a story in more than capitalize on popularity, which is a great choice in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And a bit of a sadder note, and I guess not really too somber, but Disney also announced that when 2019 rolls around, according to DisneyParks.com, Walt Disney Company will eliminate single-use plastic straws and plastic stirrers in all and operated locations across the globe, amounting to a reduction of more than 175 million straws and 13 million stirrers annually. Eliminating plastic straws and other plastic items are meaningful steps in our long-term standing commitment to environmental stewardship, said Bob Chapek, chairman of Disney Parks, Experiences and Consumer Products. These new global efforts help reduce our environmental footprint and advance our long-term sustainability goals. So Disney is getting rid of the. I at one point I saw this story earlier and immediately freaked out that this was the end of the Mickey straws, but it seems like the Mickey straws are okay for right now. It's going to be more of these single-use plastic straws. So, I mean, I guess it's Disney's way of being more environmentally conscious, and I guess that's good for them. And I know they're taking away from Starbucks.
Yeah, I mean, and it's actually something that Disney has been doing for quite a while. Disney as a whole, especially if you've been to Animal Kingdom, they're big on conservation. They're huge on getting the word out on conservation and that kind of thing. In fact, Animal Kingdom for as long as I can remember, if not since the park opened, has used recyclable straws. Number one, because of their effort for conservation, and also for the animals in the park itself. They recognize the fact that plastic straws can be harmful to animals, and there are a lot of animals that are in Animal Kingdom. So you don't want a haphazard random straw to get in any of the animal cages and cause an issue. So they've had paper straws for forever.
Oh damn! That's I didn't even think about that, but that's a really good point. Specifically with as a lot of their animals in Animal Kingdom roam relatively free, so you can't have that going on in the parks. One other thing I wanted to touch on here, it was announced by, according to People.com, the happiest place on earth will soon offer a detour into Flavortown. On Wednesday, Walt Disney World announced plans to open up Chicken Guy, a fast casual restaurant from Food Network star Guy Fieri at Disney Springs in Orlando. It will serve as the original flagship location of what will eventually be a restaurant chain that serves up chicken tenders every which way, from grilled or fried, in a sandwich or on a skewer or in a salad. There will also be 22 different sauce options, one being Fieri's signature donkey sauce, presumably, and a sauce slinger who roams the restaurant with a holster filled with condiments. Beyond the tenders, Chicken Guy will also offer sides like loaded fries with quote-unquote SMC, super melty cheese in Fieri speak, and Mac Daddy mac and cheese, along with desserts called Flavortown frozen treats like double mint or cinnamon apple soft serve. And one of the main reasons why this is such a big deal is because of the fact that it was announced that everything at this particular quick service, and I don't even know if this is going to be a quick service, because if they have servers walking around with kind of sauce guns, it might be a sit down. But so it seems like everything that they do is going to be $7 or less. Everything they serve is going to be $7 or less, which if you're going to Disney, that's a pretty big deal, because I don't know of too many even quick services that you can get food for under $7. What are your thoughts on this particular Guy Fieri coming to Disney Springs?
First, I just wanted to point out that although it was announced that it was going to be $7, they actually just redacted that so that they haven't decided on pricing yet. But if it does come to pass that it's going to be $7 or less, I mean, I think that's going to be a great choice. The only problem is a lot of times you get what you paid for. But I've never been to a Guy Fieri restaurant myself, so I will reserve judgment on the food until I actually have it. But I think it would be an interesting concept. And one thing that Disney Springs was lacking was your quick service options, or your fast casual, or whatever lingo you want to use. But I think they've definitely improved upon that very recently. I don't know. I'm going to reserve further judgment until I actually have it.
You do always tell me, though, you get what you pay for. And I know that we've been to a couple of those, some of the character dining where you get the buffet for sometimes a little bit of a cheaper price, and the food option there, in comparison to some of the nicer sit-down places, are not as good. So we'll see. I mean, Guy Fieri's made a name for himself, and it'll be a big deal, I guess, when it opens. And I guess we'll give it a shot and see how it goes.
Yeah.
That's all I have in terms of around the magic, so to speak, in terms of things going around in the world. Any other news tidbits you wanted to touch on?
The only I did come up with, I stumbled upon a rumor. Every so often there's a rumor that comes up that Illuminations over at Epcot, the nighttime fireworks show and laser light show, is going to be either coming to an end or changing. And this is one of those rumors, along with certain attractions getting closed down or reimagined, that pops up every so often in the Disney sphere. The last rumor that Illuminations is going to be changing stems from the fact that the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which is kind of Disney's quote unquote governing body here in Orlando, has filed for permits for about, I think it was $2 million worth of renovations to the World Showcase Lagoon. That's the lake over there in Epcot around the World Showcase where the nighttime fireworks come off. And I think that, every so often these kinds of things come up, and they always kind of end up falling by the wayside. $2 million might sound like a lot of money to us, but if anybody's ever been to Epcot, you take a look around, and this could just be a landscaping thing. $2 million to Disney really is couch money. It's whatever you find in the cushions. So I think for that kind of renovation, they're going to actually come out and get in front of it and say, this is going to be an announcement we're going to make. Yes, Illuminations is changing. We're not going to find out because of a permit filing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know when we were down there a few weeks ago, and we spoke about Illuminations, and I was, my wife's parents were super into it. It's the first time they'd ever seen the show, and when we spoke about it, he said that it had been around for a really long time. I was really surprised, and I think certainly now they've updated. At least they've just debuted the Animal Kingdom show. What is it? Color Summoner?
Rivers of Light.
Rivers of Light. There you go. That's not going to be that's the first of many times that Steve will correct my titling different Disney things. But Rivers of Light, and then obviously when they debuted the new fireworks show over at Magic Kingdom about a year or two ago, I think it's time for an update for Epcot's show. Even though I always like Illumination, so I guess we'll see, and we'll see if anything comes of that.
Yeah, and I mean, most of the time, Disney is good with, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Unless they're going to come up with something new, they're not just going to change it for the sake of changing it. Especially something that has worked and is so popular in Illuminations. They're not going to change it or replace it unless they know they have a really good idea of what's coming after it. That's
awesome. That's as long as they don't get rid of Fantasmic, let's leave that the way it is. I love Fantasmic.
Your favorite, of course.
Spot in my heart there, so I hope that they keep going with that. But good stuff, and now we'll make our transition now into our big topic of the first episode here of Disney 101. We're going to be starting our journey into kind of giving you guys a bit of a beginner's guide to Walt Disney World. And Steve, do you want to kind of take that away?
Sure. And so this is to help either first-time Walt Disney World visitors or maybe people that kind of have come a couple of times, but maybe haven't gotten the most out of their vacations. So this is really for everyone to get the most magic out of their vacation. The first few pieces I think we're going to be doing during this segment can basically be summarized in one word, and that word is plan. And that might sound obvious, but I'm going to break that down a little bit more. First and foremost, so for those first-time visitors, you kind of, that decision a lot of times isn't made like, it's going to be, okay, we finally, everybody's time off is going to end up working. The kids, are old enough to be able to appreciate coming down to Walt Disney World. We've saved up enough money to be able to afford this kind of trip and that kind of thing. So this decision a lot of times isn't made lightly. For first time visitors, you're either going to be a young family or maybe a family that, for a lot of people, this is going to be the trip of a lifetime. And this is a once in a lifetime trip. So for a lot of people, there's, number one, a lot of pressure there, a lot of pressure for you to make the most out of this visit if this is going to be your one shot. And so in order to make the most out of your vacation, to make sure that maybe if this is your only time coming, you want to be able to maybe get all the things that you want to do, or maybe you're just going in blind and you have no idea what to expect. I know when we first came down for the first time, I didn't really know a lot about Disney World as in general. I had heard about Space Mountain and Splash Mountain, but I had never actually seen anything in person that comes close to it. So I think your first thing to do once you've made that decision to make the jump and come down and visit Walt Disney World, your first decision, decision that you have to make is when you're going to come.
Yeah, I think that certainly is something I know for the first time we came to visit you guys in 2013. It was dead smack middle of the summer, July. That piece of footage of my wife huddled in like some random shade corner looking the most miserable person ever while rocking a very fancy pair of mini ears. So I assume you mean to probably steer away from the summertime.
I mean, you know what? There is something to be said for coming down during the summer. Yeah, it's going to be hot, so if you're coming from somewhere that is not used to heat, although you're probably used to it by now, being up in New York, being a native New Yorker myself, I know that it can get just as hot up in New York as it does down here. It just lasts a little bit longer down here, and it does tend to get more humid. But other than that, it's hot no matter where you're going to go. And I think we could probably do a whole segment just on, if you're going to be coming down to the summer, here's some advice, and we can definitely do that later. But coming down to the summer is not a bad option, honestly. If you have kids that you weren't going to take out of school, that you want to just wait until they're on that summer break, that's fine. Yeah, the heat, you're going to have to deal with it, but that's why there are so many other options to be able to at least curtail that a little bit. But also, you are going to get wet. It is going to rain in Florida during the summer. It is called the Sunshine State, but we also get a lot of rain. Usually, it's during the afternoon, and usually, for the most part, I'll say it's fairly, in and out. And it'll come in, the storm will roll in, it'll rain hard for maybe a half hour to an hour, and then it rolls out. More often than not, that's what you're going to be dealing with. So as long as you can pick a place to hunker down for that little bit of time to wait out the storm, and you're not caught out in the open somewhere, you'll be fine. At least for when the summer goes. The crowds aren't as bad as you might think. Actually, I just went to the parks a couple of weeks ago, and aside from waiting 2 hours or so for Flight of Passage at Animal Kingdom, the lines weren't too bad. And, one of the things that goes hand in hand with that is planning. So if you can plan your day around the heat and around those thunderstorms. And so as long as, if you are going to make that jump to come down during the summer, you're going to have to do a little bit more planning, or maybe different planning, I should say. There are going to be different things to take into account, but that's true no matter when you're coming down. It's just, your planning is going to take a slightly different turn.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is good about coming down, if you do decide to go down in the summer, is you're also getting a little bit more time to do your to be in the parks. When we went down in January, one of the things that we were trying to do was, have a full day in the park, but by 6, 7 o'clock, the parks are basically starting to already end your day. So I think that, and it's relatively cold. Who wants to go on things like Splash Mountain when it's freezing cold outside? So
That is true.
it'd be tough to do.
That is true. But January is actually one of my times where I would actually say it's one of the better times to come down,
Okay.
because of the fact that if you don't mind taking the kids out of school, or if you don't have kids to take out of school, or if you're just going to leave them at home and call them up while you're on the monorail and brag to them about how you're in Disney World and they're at school, that's an option too. But if taking the kids out of school, or whatever the case may be, if that's not a problem, then January is a great time to come. Mostly because the weather usually is mild. You said it was cold, but also keeping in mind that more often than not, wherever you're going to be leaving, unless you live, in the area, if you live north of Tallahassee, chances are the weather that you're going to be leaving is going to be worse than what it is here.
That is, I mean, I think I'm glad because I'm coming from New York. It was probably like 0 degrees, and in Florida it was probably like 60, 65.
Right. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it wasn't really chillier.
I will say though, one of the things that I would say about coming in January is you're going to have to make sure that you plan to you come down maybe the second half of January. And I say that because number one, there is the Walt Disney World Marathon the first week of January, which is 4 days of Run Disney events. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Run Disney races. I've done several myself. I love doing it. I plan on doing the Walt Disney World Marathon one day or one year. But because of the crowds, number one, because of the fact that it does draw its own crowd, and because there are a few detours and a few other game changers, it might be a time to steer clear if you're not racing, or if no one in your party is racing, because of the fact that there is so much else going on that it might curtail what you're planning on doing a little bit. Now, it also depends on how long you're going to be coming down for. If you're only coming down for a long weekend, like you guys usually do, and you're trying to fit in as much as possible, the shorter park hours during January are going to hinder you a little bit. It's definitely longer park hours during the summer because of that. Number one, because of the extra daylight, and just because it is a slightly busier time, so they want to extend the park hours a little bit. But if when my wife and I would come down on vacation, we would usually pick the second or third week of January, trying to avoid Martin Luther King Day to an extent, because it is it is still a 3-day holiday weekend, but it's not the busiest weekend by any means. I would just avoid the race day. But when we would come down for our vacations, we would come down for about a week, and that way you're not rushed to do as much as you possibly can in a given day, and you're not running and gunning like we're famous for doing when you're done.
Every single trip. But yeah, so in saying that, and saying that you should try to come down middle of January there, maybe the summer's not so bad. Are there any times you'd say to try to avoid coming down to the parks?
Oh, absolutely. Now, the 1 week that I would say you're going to avoid if you're a first timer is the week between Christmas and New Year's. Now, and also most Florida residents will agree with you there as well, and most cast members will agree with you to say that for no other reason than the crowds. The crowds during the week between Christmas and New Year's are consistently record breaking. You're talking about 90 to 100,000 people in the Magic Kingdom, 90 to 100,000 people in Epcot at any given day. So in order to avoid doing that, avoid that week. Now, don't get me wrong, Disney during the holidays, it's fantastic.
About as good as it gets, sure.
Magic Kingdom is fully decked out with a Christmassy overlay. And it also offers Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party on select nights. And Epcot offers Holiday Around the World, which features food and drinks and like activities and stuff from the various countries in the World Showcase. And each park is going to have a supersized Christmas tree that's true to the theming of each park. So the Animal Kingdom Christmas tree is going to have a lot of, Animal Kingdom-y themes to it, and all of the other parks have their own trees as well as some of the deluxe resorts. They all have their own decorations as well. So
Wow,
like the
that
Grand
sounds
Floridian has a huge tree. The Boardwalk and the Yacht and Beach Club over at Disney's Boardwalk, they have amazing decorations. So if you're going to be coming down, if you want to come down for the holidays, try coming down the first couple of weeks of December because the decorations are all up. Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party is going. You're just not dealing with as much crowds as that week between Christmas and New Year's.
there you go. Yeah, no, that makes sense, especially because of. I feel like that it might actually pay to come down if you're doing the holidays, maybe in the beginning of the month of December or the end even almost of November, so that people are still in school and you're still getting a lot of that kind of holiday festivities, so to speak, going on in the parks.
Yeah, November is kind of a tricky month because you do have the Food and Wine Festival over at Epcot wrapping up. You will inevitably have a Jersey Week, which it sounds worse than it is, but it's basically the state of New Jersey. Has the public school system there has basically a week where all of the schools are basically the teachers have conferences. Whether it's professional development or whatever the case is. Basically, the public school system of New Jersey says we're going to take this week off. Kids are going to have this week off from school. So what a lot of people do is they will come down to Walt Disney World, and it can get busy during that time because it also usually falls around the time that the Run Disney event for Food and Wine Festival, the Wine and Dine half marathon events are going on. So the first couple of weeks of November are also kind of iffy, and then of course you also have Thanksgiving week.
Right.
So if you're going to be coming down during November, maybe you want to pick that week in between Food and Wine Festival and Thanksgiving. But then a lot of times the Christmas parties might not be going on. Oh. So you have to take out a calendar, make sure, if you're going to be going down around that time, then you want to make sure that, you're going to be getting the most out of, if you're coming down for the Christmas decorations and the holidays and stuff, try and pick a time after Thanksgiving.
And do you think that, I know that we've gone down there, really, when you guys got married, we've been down there in April, and we were also down there last year around April, and I felt April was an okay time to go down to the parks.
Yeah, April's a good time, as long as you're not. If you don't mind crowds coming down during spring break or Easter break or whenever that will fall for you, that's not a bad time at all. The crowds aren't going to be as bad. During spring break, it can get kind of iffy, but it's nowhere near what Christmas or New Year's Eve looks like. And the weather isn't that bad, but it is considered a peak time. The two biggest and most busiest times at Walt Disney World are the 2 weeks around Christmas and New Year's and the 2 weeks around Easter. And Disney themselves even kind of admit that because the gold annual pass that they offer has blockout dates, and the only two blockout dates are around those times of the year.
And is there ever a time when there's just too many people, they close down they stop letting people in?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially during Christmas and New Year's, it's they will go through a phased closure, which usually means, usually Animal Kingdom and Hollywood Studios are the first two to close down, just because they have the smallest capacities.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that has to be the ultimate heartbreak. You get yourself. Oh, Steve, your mic is. Your mic is out. Can't hear you too well down there. But I will say, in the different times that we've come down to the parks, it's been a little bit difficult. You know, that particular time, if you think about it, with so many people coming into the parks, it's cool because, you know, here you are, you want to be around the crowd, you expect the crowd, but the ultimate heartbreak of showing up to the Magic Kingdom and not being able to get in sounds like that'd be the worst feeling in the world.
Well, and that's why they do a phase closure. So usually, what that, you know, I think they use a different terminology now, but basically it goes, the first people that they will kind of stop from letting in are going to be either people that haven't bought a ticket yet, or people that have only bought 1 day tickets, or usually Florida residents and cast members. And that's just because we have more of an opportunity to come down.
Right.
You know, the next set is going to be, you know, ticket holders that are not staying at Disney property. So I would definitely recommend, if you do have to come down during those days, stay on Disney property. It is worth it, I promise. So your next closure is, you know, basically the only ways to really guarantee getting into the park once the park is closed and reached capacity is if you have a dining reservation in one of the parks.
Okay.
So they will be, you know, and they will let you, you know, unless they physically cannot let another person into the park, which very rarely happens. But the best way to guarantee if they do start closing down is to have a dining reservation at the park.
There you go. Well, it's definitely good to know, and definitely to kind of keep those things in there. I know a lot of folks, a lot of families, as you said, you know, it's you know, the summer comes, that's like the time a lot of folks want to come. They want a vacation during that period of time, or during the holidays, or during the weeks when people have off school. However, you have to keep in mind when those different weeks happen, there's going to be a lot of people who are having the same mindset. So it's good to kind of have that guide to know. And I know they say that the September, October, like September is usually a pretty good month because everyone's now coming back, right?
Yeah, September and October are probably, in my opinion, the best times to come down. For no other reason than there's the most to do that you don't usually get around other times of the year. Both the Food and Wine Festival over at Epcot, which is a great opportunity. It's a great it's a great event that they hold over there at Epcot, and also Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party is also a great time, especially if you're a Halloween fan.
That's one of the few times you can actually dress up as a character if you're over the age of 14, right?
If you're over the age of 14, yeah, it's one of the only times that you can dress up when you're an adult, so you can get your Disney nerd on. It's, you know, there are still kind of limitations and guidelines that you might want to keep in mind if you're going around that time of year. You don't want to look too much like a Disney character because they will stop you at the gates. Also, if you are seen taking pictures or posing or doing your own little personal meet and greet as a Disney character, they will put a stop to that as well. And they, you know, they might give you a warning, or they might actually ask you to leave the park. So just things to keep in mind.
Besides, if you ever want to visit, you know, Mickey Mouse with a fanny pack, you can visit me here in New York and come down to Times Square. We have him out there, and you know.
I'm talking more about you know, impersonating princesses, or you know, maybe like Marvel you know, what they call face characters. You know, impersonating those people can come with a high punishment, I guess you could say. And the only thing I would say to keep in mind when you're coming down during September, October, is that it is hurricane season. So it, you know, it doesn't happen often that Central Florida gets hit. The past couple of years, we've had one big storm each year, but luckily not too bad. And it's usually come later on in the year. So September is usually not a bad time.
There was a time that recently you guys actually, the entire Disney World closed down because of the hurricanes, right?
Yeah, they closed. I believe they closed early one day, and then they stayed closed the next day, and then they were able to reopen. Which
so infrequently, it was like a really big deal. It was all over the news that Disney World had closed down.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of, you know, I believe there's a post that comes out that's like, you know, it's bad when Waffle House closes early. It's, you know, it's really, really bad when Disney closes because they've only closed like 3 times in their history.
Oh my gosh, that's insane. I mean, well, you just think about, when they close, the amount of money that is lost on that day is so much. It's exponential. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's not just that, but like, yeah, they might lose money, but the amount of manpower and the logistics that takes into account of closing down attractions, securing them, making sure everything is tied down and secured properly, because it's not just closing for the sake of closing, it's closing because there's a natural, there's an emergency going on. So you not just have to think about logistically, what are we doing to close down the parks, but what are we doing to prepare to make sure that the least amount of damage possible happens?
Gotcha. No, that makes sense, and that's definitely something I feel like in Florida, you guys always have to think about is those hurricanes and but something that we've learned specifically in coming down to Disney World is don't get too discouraged if there is a little bit of a storm, as we kind of mentioned earlier. Because 9 times out of 10, within an hour or two, those storms have passed and you'll be ready to go back on the attractions. Not even an hour or two. Sometimes it could be 10, 15 minutes and those storms pass. One minute you're in a poncho, the next minute you're sweating bullets, taking that poncho off, looking to go down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, if you do happen to get stuck in one of those afternoon thunderstorms, once it passes, just walk around a little bit and, the sun will dry you right up. You'll be fine.
That's very true. It's very true. Is there anything, I mean, I think that, we could, certainly, is there anything else you wanted to continue in terms of that beginner's guide? I mean, part of me feels like we definitely, went through a lot of the different times, the best times to come down here, to come down to Disney World, and also sometimes to stay away from. Is there anywhere else that you wanted to continue down our beginner's guide, or you think maybe we take a pause for the cause this week and pick things back up next time around?
I think that's a good place to start. Picking your date and your time frame is the best thing to do. Just also keep in mind your next step once you pick when you're coming down is how long you're going to be coming down. And if you want to treat it as an actual vacation that you're going to be able to relax and maybe you're going to do some of the things that aren't Disney related, if you want to check out Universal, if you want to check out SeaWorld, there's a lot of other stuff to do in Orlando, that you can do and we're also really close to the beach. So if you want to get and maximize your trip to Orlando in general, think about coming down. Think about at least a week coming down, and maybe try and plan. Maybe try and do it one day per park.
Yeah, no,
especially if it's your first time coming down. When you guys usually come down, we usually have 2 or 3 days when we're trying to fit everything in. And I'm sure, later on when you get to be a pro, exactly how to work out, trying to fit in everything Disney that you want to do in such a short time. But if you're coming down for the first time and you want to make sure that you're maximizing everything that you want to fit in, try and do it for a week.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we've talked about doing, because as much fun as it is to try to run and gun and do as many things as possible in one fell swoop, I remember a time when we did stay on property and we were down there for a long weekend and we tried to squeeze, I think it was at the time Downtown Disney, into our stay, and took the Disneyland transportation, Disney World transportation rather, took that down to Downtown Disney, finally got down there, and no one wanted to get off the bus because we were all so dead tired from running around all day.
Right, and that's something that I'll talk about a little bit more next time is, but know your family and know your limits. When you guys usually visit us, it's usually just you and your wife. We're a bunch of adults, and at least until recently, adults that could go out. And when we would go out into Manhattan or whatever, we would stay out until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. If you are not those types of people that that don't have the endurance and the stamina to do, a long day anywhere else, a day at Disney is that much harder to do. It's like running a marathon in and of itself.
Really?
So, if you have small kids or if you have anybody in your party that you know right off the bat doesn't have that kind of stamina to be up on their feet or walking around that much or whatever the case may be. Um, you know, don't try and think that you can do everything in one day, even if you're just going to the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah, it's going to be, it is too much. And I know also something also to consider is, you know, I think Steve's point about trying to do one park a day is really a good idea. We've been down specifically in Disneyland a couple of times, and we've had Fast Pass at California Adventure at like 10 o'clock, and then a Fast Pass in Disneyland at 1 o'clock, and then back another one at 5 o'clock at California Adventure. And we've gone back and forth because the parks are literally right there next to each other, but you're still dead tired because they're not that close. If you think, oh, Disneyland's right there, I'm over here at California Adventure, I could just run to the next attraction and then come back. And we've had to go back to the hotel and take a nap just because of how much it is. You know, it's heat, it's crowded, and you definitely have to learn to take your time. So I do think a week, specifically if you do want to also fit some more stuff in, a week is a good barometer there to kind of set. Because the last thing in the world you want to do is you only have 3 days. You try to do every single thing, and you burn yourself out after the first day, and then the other 2 days are spent doing nothing.
Oh yeah. The one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can also give is to pace yourself. You know, you don't want to get burnt out within that first day or two. And it inevitably, I see it happen whenever we're in the parks. There's always one parent or another that is pushing a stroller, and they just have that zombie that, you know, that like, you know, 50-yard stare that, you know, army veterans get, just like, I can't believe I'm like, how are you still walking?
Right.
How are you still on your feet? How are you still upright?
We've taken my wife's brother down to Disney World a couple of times, to land once too, and he was, you know, we did the one park a day, and then went from like the second the park opened at 9 o'clock, ended at like 11 o'clock, and he wanted to then go to downtown Disney, because in Land I think it is still down. Is it in Land? Is it still downtown Disney, or are they Disney Springs as well?
No, it's still downtown Disney there.
Yeah, so he wanted to go check that out for a bit, and we're both exhausted at this point. Like, come on, dude. But you know, for a kid, you know, anybody, I feel like, first off, when you're going for the first time, it's the greatest, most incredible experience ever. It's just, you know, your senses are completely overwhelmed, and you're just like loving life. And specifically when you couple that with the fact that he was about 15, 16 at the time, and still a kid, that's about as good as it gets. And you know, the younger you are, it's even better, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, my first time was when I was 22, and I was still awestruck and completely. I had that, you know, it doesn't matter how old you are. You know, walking into the Magic Kingdom for the first time is you're a kid.
Yeah, and it is something also where, and I remember you guys coming back from your first trip there, you know, when you had gone and saying, "Oh, I can't wait to go back," and immediately started planning your next one. I went down in 2013, came back, started listening to Disney podcasts and just trying to absorb as much information about Disney as possible. And so, yeah, it really is. Once you get that bug, it's something that you just want to keep doing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, is there anything else you wanted to add there as we kind of wrap up our first episode here of Disney 101?
No, I think that is definitely enough to think about until next week.
Next week, we do have something really cool set for you guys here. I kind of talked with Steve about this in the past, and correct me if I'm wrong. We have planned that, you know, there are times you go to Disney World and your main goal is, oh, we're going to do Epcot, we're going to do Magic Kingdom, we're going to do Hollywood Studios, we're going to do Animal Kingdom, we're going to hit the road. Well, there's so much more to do there other than those parks. And next week, we're going to kind of dive in. Our big topic is going to be what to do when you go down to Disney World if you decide to have a parkless trip. Maybe you come down to Disney World and you don't go to any theme parks. And we're going to dive into all that next week. So make sure you guys hit subscribe here on this YouTube channel. Also on this YouTube channel throughout the week, and you know, sporadically, I may add some other Disney-themed videos throughout. We just went down. We visited with Steve and his wife not long ago. We have some videos from that trip. We have some videos from years ago, videos from our trip to Paris and our trips to Disneyland. So we'll post all those videos up little by little over on the on this here YouTube. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, and also follow us over on Twitter. You could follow the Disney 101 podcast at Disney 101 Pod. That's at Disney 101 POD. And Steve, do you have any other plugs that you'd like to? Anything else you'd like to
add? No, I think I'm good.
Can anyone follow? You're on the Twitter? Do you want to give out your Twitter handle?
Yeah, sure. My Twitter handle is SteveCJ556, and you can also follow me on Instagram as millennial_Falcon27.
There you go. Look at that. I didn't even know Steve's Instagram. I wasn't even going to mention Instagram. I didn't know your thing was public. Mine is still on lockdown as terms of Instagram, but you can follow me on Twitter at Tommy on the Spot. You'll probably get a wrestling fix in there as well, because I do usually tweet quite a bit about the world of professional wrestling. But certainly, I'd love to interact with you guys. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to hit us up on Twitter, and we will see you next week on Disney 101. Until then, thank you so much for checking us out here, and take care.
All right.
Hang on, I'm going to stop the